Hi, this is Raphael Mudge, the creator of Cobalt Strike. Welcome to Part 6 of Advanced Threat Tactics, Lateral Movement. In this lecture, we're going to go through how to expand from our foothold, elevate our rights in the domain, and take over the network. We're going to introduce concepts around Windows Enterprise networks and vocabulary. We'll then spend some time talking about host and user enumeration. And just to make sure it's very clear, we'll talk about options to operate against the target and interact with it without using any malware at all. We'll then talk about all kinds of different trust material and how to repurpose that trust material into a trust relationship that you can use to attack a target. And we'll talk about how to use that trust relationship to get remote code execution on a target. Let's start with the Windows Enterprise. Active Directory is a collection of technologies to allow central management of users, systems, and policies. Okay? A concept within Active Directory is the concept of a domain. A domain is both an administrative and technical boundary where users and systems are managed with Active Directory technologies. Within a domain are a few central servers that act as the broker of trust for that domain. Those central servers are the domain controllers. Those are systems that authenticate users and systems on the domain. A local user. A local user is a standalone account on a system, okay? When we specify a local user account on the Windows command line or with Cobalt Strike's automation, we do it either as computer name / the user, and by computer name I mean the NetBIOS name, or we do it with a period for the computer name, which is a placeholder or wildcard for that computer name / the user. A domain user. A domain user is a user account on the domain controllers, okay? And these accounts are specified as the domain name / the user, okay? A local administrator. A local administrator is a user with administrator rights on a system, okay? So a local user could be, a local administrator could be a domain user or a local user. It doesn't matter. But as far as that system is concerned, that user can do things. A domain administrator. A domain administrator is a user with administrator rights on the domain controller. A domain administrator is also a local administrator for everything in the domain. Okay. When it comes to enumeration, there's a few questions you want to ask when you have a foothold in the network, okay? First and foremost, you want to know which domain am I on, okay? You want to know what domain you're dealing with. That's very important. But domains don't usually exist in isolation in a big enterprise. They usually belong to a forest with a whole multitude of different types of trust relationships. So the next thing you want to know are what are the domain trust relationships, okay? The next thing you want to know is for these domains that you can reach out and touch, which systems are in these domains? What are your targets? What can you touch? And also, just because it's where the data lives and you might not even need to elevate, it's very helpful to find out which shares are on these systems because that might be your opportunity to just get the data you need, pull it out, and say mission accomplished. Let's go through a few enumeration commands. Here are a few Windows commands to answer many of these questions. NetView WAC domain will tell you what the primary domain you're on in your current context. Okay? You can do NetView WAC domain : the domain name to get a list of hosts in that domain. And it's not going to be every host, but what it is, it's basically the network neighborhood view if you've ever clicked that icon on a Windows desktop. You can also do NetGroup domain computers WAC domain to get a list of the computer accounts for systems joined to the domain. And these computer account names map very well to the NetBIOS names of systems joined to the domain. Now, if you want to find out which hosts are the domain controllers for the domain, you can use the nltest command. Just do nltest whack DC list and the domain name. Okay, cool, cool. Oftentimes in Cobalt Strike, you will interact with a target just by its NetBIOS name. Okay, you don't really care if it's an IPv4 address. You don't really care if it's IPv6. NetBIOS names and fully qualified domain names are, in my opinion, the way to go. But if you want to translate a NetBIOS name to an IPv4 address, you can do it with NSLOOKUP, or you can use ping to send one packet to that host and get back the IP address that way as well. Now, if you want to map domain trust, you can use the nltest command to do so. So just do nltest whack domain_trust. Next, if you want to list shares on a host, just do netview backwhack NetBIOS name of a target to get a list of shares on that host as well. Okay, let's do some target enumeration a couple of different ways. We'll do it the Windows command line way, we'll do it with PowerView, and we'll do it with Beacon's net module. Let's start out by figuring out which domain we're on. Okay, we're on the Playland domain. Cool. Let's find out where the domain controller is in the Playland domain. So we'll just do an nltest whack DC list Playland. The command is going to fail because we are a 32-bit payload on a 64-bit system and nltest is not in our path. So what we need to do is specify cwindows sysnative, that is the real system 32 on this 64-bit system, and just do whack DC list Playland. And there we go. The DC is at dc.playland.testlab. Very cool. And by DC, I mean domain controller. Let's try a couple other things. Let's try to figure out some targets. Let's do a netview whack domain Playland. And this is going to give us that network neighborhood view. And if we want more, we can find the computer accounts of systems joined to the domain by just doing a net group domain computers whack domain. And there's the computer accounts of the different systems joined to this domain. So that's enumeration of targets on the Windows command line. Something you should become very familiar with, though, is a PowerShell script called PowerView. PowerView is also written by Will Schrader. Okay? PowerView is a network situational awareness tool written in PowerShell. Here's a few commandlets in PowerView to know. Invoke netview will find machines on the local domain. Okay? Invoke sharefinder will find non-standard shares on the network. And invoke map domain trust will find all trusts for the current domain. If you want to run these, just do PowerShell import the local path to PowerView.ps1 and use PowerShell, whatever commandlet and arguments you want to run these commands. Now let's do things the PowerView way. We'll just do PowerShell import and we'll bring in, it's under Power Tools, PowerView, PowerView.ps1. And let's do PowerView invoke netview. Okay? And this should give us back the same information, roughly, as our netview whack domain. And by roughly, I mean that and a bit more. So here, it can see information about the system we're currently on, Climber, and which accounts are logged onto it. Same with the file server as well, and the domain controller. Okay, so a bunch of information about these different systems. And it also tells us which systems are the domain controllers as well. So that's a little bit of a target enumeration with PowerView. Cobalt Strike includes its own net module. And the net module is a beacon post-exploitation module that provides commands that map to the Windows Network Management Functions API. To use the net module, you just type net in the beacon console, and then whatever command you want it to execute. So you can do net DC list to get a list of domain controllers for the current domain, or net DC list to get a list of domain controllers for another domain. Okay? You can do net share // target to list shares on the target. And you can do net view or net view // in the domain name to list hosts on the domain. The output of these commands is very, very similar to what you get from the native net commands, but it's a little bit different. The syntax is also a little bit different as well. Now, let me show you the net module in Beacon. Let's just do net DC list. And there we go. There's the DC for Playland. And we can just do net view. And the net module's view command will give us the same output as shell net view, but it will also get the IP address of the target, and it will tell us which version of Windows it's running, and the comment for that system as well. Also, this information will go into Cobalt Strike's host data model as well. So if we come over here to the targets thing, we can see the DC and file server are there now. Okay, so by this point, we've done some host and trust enumeration. We have an idea of which domain we're on, and we know about the domain controllers, and we know where some targets are. Cool.